Today, Pompeii is quiet. Broken walls, empty streets, roofless rooms, stone thresholds worn smooth by feet that vanished almost 2,000 years ago. Most people meet Pompeii as a ruin. Ash, silence, bodies preserved in their final shape. But before it became a warning, Pompeii was a living Roman city. Homes, bakeries, baths, workshops, gardens, shrines, kitchens, fountains, courtyards, and walls covered with color. So in this video, we will not begin with disaster. We will reconstruct the city before the ash. Street by street, house by house, room by room. Only then will Vesuvius return, because Pompeii's importance is not simply that it died. It is that it was preserved while still alive. The reconstructions in this video are visual interpretations guided by maps, engravings, photographs, and historical references. They are not the past itself, but they help reveal the shape of a city that no longer exists. The eruption of 79 AD did something almost unique in history. It stopped time, a bakery in the middle of production, a construction project still unfinished, a household interrupted without warning, a fresco abandoned before the painter could complete it. Few Roman cities preserve daily life at this level of detail. Rome itself was rebuilt, altered, dismantled, and layered over by centuries of later history. Most Roman cities remained occupied, their ancient streets disappearing beneath medieval towns and modern development. Pompeii was different. Pompeii was sealed. And because it was sealed, it preserved not only the monuments of Roman life, but also its texture, the ordinary details that usually vanish first. Pompeii was not a capital. It was not a seat of imperial power. It was not one of the empire's great administrative cities. Pompeii was a prosperous regional city in Campania, near the Bay of Naples. Close enough to Rome to absorb Roman culture, yet far enough away to develop a character and commercial identity of its own. It was a place where merchants traded, artisans worked, politicians competed for influence, and families built lives that they expected would continue for generations. In many ways, Pompeii was not exceptional. And that is precisely why it matters. Because what survived beneath the ash was not the story of emperors or generals. It was the story of ordinary Romans. That is why the disaster feels so heavy. Not because the city was strange, but because it was familiar. Pompeii was enclosed by walls and entered through gates. Inside those walls, it was dense, layered, and in constant motion. Water moving through lead and terracotta pipes from a reservoir fed by the regional aqueduct system, arriving at public fountains positioned at regular intervals, so no neighborhood was far from public water. Smoke rising from bakery ovens, election notices painted in red and black directly onto plastered walls, graffiti scratched into stone at eye level alongside them. Pompeii's walls were not blank surfaces waiting for official messages. They were a communication medium. The same plaster surface that carried an official public notice might also carry someone's insult, a declaration of affection, a business advertisement, or a record of money owed. It all went on the same wall, and Pompeii apparently tolerated that. Let's start with Pompeii's streets, because it was there that Pompeii announced itself. Today, Pompeii's streets look stripped back, gray stone lanes edged by raised sidewalks, the bones of a city with all the flesh removed. But in 79, those roads were the circulatory system of everything. They carried people, goods, animals, water, noise, and the unspoken rules of who belonged where. Some streets were narrow enough that two people passing had to turn sideways. Others widened into busier routes where shopfronts, taverns, and workshops pressed against each other in competition for attention. The paving stones were not cut smooth and level like modern surfaces. They were heavy, slightly irregular, shaped by years of use, rutted by cartwheels, polished by feet. At intersections, raised stepping stones crossed the road at pavement height. Pedestrians could move from one sidewalk to another without dropping into the channel below, where rainwater and whatever else came with it ran down the middle of the street. The stones were spaced precisely enough for cartwheels to pass between them without catching. That one detail is worth stopping on. It means someone in Pompeii, a city planner or a roads official, or possibly just someone with practical sense, worked out that the stone gaps had to be wide enough for a cart axle, but narrow enough for a person to step across comfortably. Function and use built into the same piece of stone. Pompeii streets were not scenic lanes preserved for tourists. They were engineered compromises between competing pressures. Pedestrians needed to cross without stepping into the stream of wastewater and runoff that flowed along the road channel below. Cart traffic needed to move without obstruction. Shop owners needed their counters to be visible and accessible from the pavement. Householders needed their thresholds respected. Fountains needed footfall around them. Shrines needed to be seen at corners. None of those pressures pointed in the same direction. And Pompeii solved them not with one grand organizing scheme, but with hundreds of small architectural negotiations repeated across the whole city. A doorway angled to deflect traffic, a stepping stone placed to invite crossing at exactly the right point, a counter built to exactly the height where a standing customer could eat without needing to go inside. A painted shrine at a corner where 3 streets met, reminding people who was watching over that particular crossing. These were not accidents. Pompeii was constantly blurring the line between public and private. A wealthy household could hide a garden of considerable beauty behind a wall that told you absolutely nothing from the outside. A small workshop could occupy the front rooms of a larger property, while a family lived in the rooms behind. A shop could open directly onto the street from the ground floor of a house where someone was cooking dinner above. The street was the first room of Pompeii. Every building that faced it was performing for it, whether the owner intended that or not. That is where the city starts to feel real again. Not because every structure was impressive, but because every structure was communicating something. If the street of Pompeii was the public face of Pompeii, then the house was where status became architecture. An elite Pompeian house did not advertise itself from the outside. The street facade was often plain, even closed. The entrance was narrow. Nothing about the exterior suggested what was inside. That was deliberate. The Roman house was not designed to impress from the outside. It was designed to unfold. You stepped through the entrance, and the city noise narrowed behind you. The doorway led into a controlled sequence: entrance corridor, atrium, central basin, surrounding rooms, and beyond them, depending on the wealth of the household, a peristyle garden with columns, plantings, fountains, and painted walls opening around a courtyard of controlled air and light. In the atrium, an opening in the roof called the compluvium let rainwater fall into the shallow basin below. Practical, because it collects water. Theatrical, because it brought light down from above in a way that changed how the whole entrance room felt. A guest arriving from the crowded, noisy street did not simply enter a building. They entered a statement. Next is the walls. Pompeian frescoes were not decorations. They were architecture made of pigment. Painters extended rooms beyond their actual dimensions by depicting colonnades, garden landscapes, and architectural perspectives that the wall physically did not contain. They advertised the owner's education through mythological scenes. They announced taste through still lifes, theatrical masks, and carefully chosen divine subjects. They created depth where there was none, light where the room was dark, and nature where the city pressed in from every side. In 2025, excavations at the House of Thyasus revealed a remarkable banquet room fresco, a Dionysian megalography, a large-scale painted composition extending across the walls. This is not a small decorative border. It is a room-sized visual program with figures connected to Dionysus, ritual, performance, wine, and transformation. More than a century after the Villa of the Mysteries made Pompeii famous for this kind of immersive wall painting, another room reminded us that Pompeii still has layers of color waiting beneath the ash. That is the kind of detail Pompeii keeps producing. But Pompeii was not only elite households and painted rooms. Return to the street. The smell changes. Bread, fish sauce, wine, hot oil, wet wool, smoke from a workshop, animals, wastewater moving through the road channel, dust from a mill. This is important because Pompeii should not be imagined as a perfectly clean museum model. It was alive, and living cities have friction. Pompeii's economy was not hidden. It was on the pavement. Shops opened directly onto the street, with masonry counters built flush with the sidewalk. Large ceramic jars set into the counter held food, wine, or oil for sale. Bakeries had mills for grinding grain and domed ovens for firing bread. Fulleries soaked, pressed, and dried cloth using processes that relied on urine collected from public jars placed at the street edge. Pedestrians contributing to the textile industry without having to go out of their way. The Thermopolium, a counter-service food point, was not a luxury. It was infrastructure for a city where many people lived in spaces without kitchens, or with kitchens too small to support a full household diet. You did not go to a Thermopolium for a special occasion. You went because it was Tuesday and the oven at home had not been lit, and the counter on the corner was already serving. In Regio 9, excavators uncovered an active construction site, frozen mid-project by the eruption. Tools, jars, lime, and building materials were still where work had stopped. Researchers from MIT and the Archaeological Park of Pompeii later analyzed the materials and published their findings in Nature Communications in December 2025. The evidence showed builders working with hot mixing techniques, quicklime, volcanic ash, and aggregate. Not as a distant theory, but as a practice caught in the middle of use. The city that archaeologists had long described as still repairing earthquake damage from 62 AD was not only repairing, it was actively building. Pompeii in 79 AD was under construction. Not a finished city waiting for disaster, a city in the middle of becoming. Beyond the shops and houses, Pompeii had the baths. And the baths matter in a way that individual houses and shops cannot fully capture. A Roman bath complex was not simply a place to wash. It was a social environment designed around sequence. You moved through changing rooms, warm rooms, hot rooms, cold plunge pools, and exercise areas. The body experienced architecture through temperature, moving from one state to the next, as deliberately as a house moved a guest from entrance to atrium to garden. But where an elite house said, "Look at my status," the bath said, "This is what the city provides for you." The heating system ran under the floors and behind the walls, circulating hot air through channels that kept the surfaces warm to the touch. Stone benches, plaster vaults, basins and drains organized a space that was simultaneously civic and physical, public and intimate. People bathed here daily, talked, argued, made business deals, exchanged news, made friends, and lingered long after they had their bath. The baths in Pompeii felt human in a way that a monument alone cannot. Beyond the baths stood the Forum. This was the place where Pompeii performed officially. Temples, administrative buildings, market halls, porticos, and open paved spaces framed the city's civic identity. The position of each building told you who the city wanted you to think about when you stood here. And to the east of the Forum, Pompeii held one of its most impressive buildings, the amphitheater. Long before the Colosseum was built in Rome, Pompeii had an arena for spectacle. It could hold thousands of spectators, with some estimates reaching around 20,000. A city of this size, with a structure of that capacity, tells you something important. Pompeii wanted to perform itself at a larger scale than its population strictly required. That ambition is built into the stone. Now let's look at the ash, not as a spectacle, but as architecture. The eruption did not arrive as one clean cinematic instant. It unfolded in stages. Some people likely left early. Some stayed because their property, family, animals, or work held them in place. Some may have understood the falling pumice as a terrifying emergency, without having any modern model for what a volcano was about to do. That is the tragedy of Pompeii. Warning signs are obvious to us because we already know the ending. First, pumice began to fall. The roofs of Pompeii, designed to drain rainwater and support the ordinary weight of tiles, were not designed for this. They began to accumulate load. Some collapsed inward. The courtyards that had gathered light became traps. The streets that had organized movement began to fill. The stepping stones disappeared. The shop counters disappeared. The fountains, whose water had been moving since the aqueduct first arrived, fell silent under the rising debris. Then came the pyroclastic surges, fast, superheated clouds of volcanic material moving at speeds no person could outrun. The city that had been slowly filling was overwhelmed. In 2025, archaeologists working at the House of Hell and Phrixus uncovered something that stopped the excavation team. Inside a bedroom, they found a family. Not the family's bodies alone, evidence of their final decision. They had taken refuge in the room. A bed frame had been pushed against the door as volcanic lapilli accumulated outside. It was a practical, desperate attempt to keep the material out of their last pocket of air. They did not survive. 4 individuals were found there, including a child. The house is named after a mythological painting on one of its walls depicting Helle and Phrixus, figures from Greek mythology associated with desperate flight and survival. The family in the bedroom did not know they lived in the house archaeologists would one day call by that name. That is what the ash returns to us. Not abstract tragedy, specific human decisions made in a specific room. But Pompeii does not end with the eruption, and this is the part of the story that archaeology has only recently begun to tell properly. In August 2025, research published from new excavations at the Insula Meridionalis showed something that had long been suspected, but never conclusively proven. People came back. After the eruption, survivors returned to the buried city. Some came to dig through the debris for valuables. Some came to recover the bodies of people they had known. Some, according to the evidence, came to stay. A precarious settlement of some kind existed above the ash layer. Rough structures, improvised spaces, the kind of occupation that leaves faint traces and was, for a long time, dismissed or not recognized for what it was. Gabriel Zuchtriegel, director of the Archaeological Park of Pompeii, described the post-79 Pompeii emerging from these excavations as more than a city, a precarious and gray agglomeration, a kind of camp, a favela among the still recognizable ruins. That evidence changes the story of Pompeii's ending. The city was not simply abandoned as a sealed tomb from the first moment onward. It was returned to, picked through, mourned over, and partially reoccupied by people who had nowhere else to go, or something they still needed to retrieve. And then the ash won. making Pompeii what it is now. A city frozen not only by the eruption, but by every decision made in the years immediately after it, which left the buried layers undisturbed long enough for 2,000 years to pass before anyone understood what was underneath. So why does Pompeii still matter? Pompeii matters because it preserved the grammar of a Roman city. Not only its monuments, its relationships. The relationship between a shop counter and the street it served. Between a painted wall and the ambition of the person who ordered it. Between a public fountain and the neighborhood that organized itself around it. Between a bedroom door and the family pressing against it. Between a construction site mid-build and the workers who set their tools down and never returned. Every other major Roman city was absorbed by everything that came after it. Pompeii was sealed, and because it was sealed, it kept all of those relationships intact. This is what makes Pompeii valuable. Pompeii was not important because it was the grandest Roman city. It was important because it was complete enough for us to feel what a Roman city was for. Not a spectacle, not an empire, but a place where people solved the problem of living together in a dense space, where they organized movement, status, appetite, worship, commerce, and rest into an urban environment that worked. And which, on a day in 79 AD, was still working until the ash came. And that leads directly to the next video, because Pompeii shows us Rome at street level, the shop, the house, the bath, the courtyard, the wall, the city as ordinary life. But in the next episode, we step into the empire at its height. Ancient Rome, 100 AD, the capital in motion, the forums, aqueducts, apartments, temples, arenas, bath complexes, markets, and streets of the largest city in the Roman world. If Pompeii was Rome made intimate, ancient Rome was Rome made monumental. Thank you for watching. More hidden stories are waiting in stone. What should Archmyst uncover next? Tell us below.